Every culture seems to have that one tragic anti-hero figure, someone who's, well, deeply flawed, maybe even weak. But their story just sticks with you despite all their mistakes. You kind of pity them, but you also just want to shake them, right, for not being able to act.
Yeah.
But here's the big question we're tackling today. What happens when that kind of intense personal tragedy, that specific heartbreak, isn't just about the character? What if it's also a really sharp critique of the society that, allowed it all to unfold?
That's exactly where we're going. We're diving into that mix of the personal and the societal. We're looking at the classic South Asian novel Devdas by Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay. Now, it's famous everywhere as this incredibly poignant, almost heartbreaking romance. But if you dig into the source material, it's also this really powerful lens, a searing critique, you could say, of the very rigid, very patriarchal Bengali society back in the early 20th century.
Okay, that sounds like a huge story to unpack. So our mission today really is to figure out how the main character's self-destruction, Devdas's downfall, which seems driven by both this unrequited love and his total failure to push back against social rules.
Mm-hmm.
How did that create one of the most lasting archetypes in literature? It's like the ultimate story of regret leading to ruin.
Yeah, and to really get the weight of it, you have to picture the setting. We're talking colonial India, early 20th century Bengal, and you've got these two massive forces just colliding. On one side, there's the emotional heart of it all, this destructive power of love that isn't fulfilled. In classical Indian literature, there's actually a concept for this, viraha.
Vira, that sounds intense. It's not just about love not being returned, is it? It feels
Right.
deeper. It implies that real psychological pain, the sorrow of being separated, right? Pining for someone who isn't there.
Precisely. The agony is focused on the separation, and that intense internal feeling crashes, like head on into the second force, the absolute rigidity of the caste system, and the power of patriarchal norms that basically dictated everything: relationships, marriage, social choices. These aren't just background details, they're almost like the real villains of the story.
Right. And caught in the middle of all that, we have this human drama, the love triangle. So there's Devdas Mukherjee. He's wealthy, but the key thing is he's weak-willed, indecisive. Then you have Parvati, or Paro. She's his childhood sweetheart, and she's portrayed as quite strong, fiery even. And then, rounding it out, there's Chandramukhi, who is a compassionate courtesan.
And the conflict that kicks it all off is, well, it's remarkably simple but just devastating because it's purely about class. See, Devdas is the son of this elite zamindar, a big landowner. Parvati grew up right next door. They were always together, inseparable, and their love just grew naturally. They kind of assumed they'd end up together.
Simple enough. But then Parvati's family actually proposes marriage. And Devdas' father doesn't just say no. He rejects it harshly. Why? Not because of anything real about them, like love or compatibility, no.
Right.
It was all driven by, and the source calls it, class pride and caste prejudice. The Mukherjees just felt Parvati's family was lower social standing because they weren't as incredibly wealthier from the same lineage.
Exactly. And that simple, almost snobbish rejection lights the fuse. But here's where the tragedy really gets going. The source points out that the real cause of the downfall isn't the father's rejection, it's Devdas himself. As soon as he faces this social obstacle, his fatal flaw just comes right out. Complete indecision, a total lack of courage. He doesn't fight the rejection, he's just paralyzed by the thought of challenging his family and his social position.
That's such a crucial point. His wealth, which you'd think would give him freedom, it actually makes his inability to act worse. He's so used to his status, so comfortable, that the idea of risking it just freezes him. It's like he's crushed by his own privilege.
Absolutely spot on. His weakness is the real engine of the tragedy. And Parvati, well, she's the stronger one here. She refuses to just sit there and suffer. She's deeply humiliated, yes, but she's also driven by self-respect, so she makes a calculated move. She agrees to marry Bhuban Chowdhury, this wealthy, much older widower from another village. She's sacrificing her heart's desire, sure, but she's doing it to fulfill his social duty, yet she's making the choice herself, asserting her agency in the only way she really can.
Wow. But there's still one last chance, isn't there? One final, incredibly painful moment. Right before her wedding, Parvati goes to Devdas secretly. And she puts it all out there, basically throws down a final, desperate challenge. Run away with me. Elope. Defy everyone right now.
It's the ultimate test for him, isn't it? And he fails. Just utterly fails. He can't get past that deep-seated fear of social shame, of what people will say. The text says he's literally paralyzed by fear. So he chooses his status, his family name over the only person he truly loves. He sends her away alone. And there's this moment where he puts a mark on her forehead, meant to symbolize their bond, but it really just seals his failure.
God, that's brutal. And that's at the point of no return. He's heartbroken, filled with this crushing shame and regret. So Devdas runs away to Calcutta, and his fall is just immediate, straight into heavy drinking, encouraged by his friend Chuni Babu, just trying to find oblivion, right?
Yeah.
To escape the memory of his own failure.
And here the story takes another big turn because the third main figure really comes into play, Chandramukhi. She's the courtesan, the woman who exists completely outside the lines of respectable society, and she's introduced almost as his potential savior, his redeemer.
Which is such a painful irony, isn't it? The only person he can accept pure, unconditional love from is someone society has already condemned. If Parvati, after her marriage, had offered him that same kind of devotion, he probably would have rejected her too, because accepting it would mean facing his fear.
That's a really sharp insight, yes. Chandramukhi is shown as genuinely kind-hearted. She falls deeply in love with him. She tries so hard to pull him back from the brink, even gives up her profession entirely to look after him, nurse his failing health. She becomes this sort of spiritual refuge for him, offering total devotion without asking him to risk his social standing.
But it's too late for Devdas, isn't it? He's just too far gone. Trapped in this mental prison he built himself out of regret and alcohol. Even with Chandramukhi's unwavering devotion, his mind, his soul, it's still stuck on Parvati, on the idealized memory of what he lost. It's a tragedy where he pushes away the love that might actually save him, all because he clings to the love he destroyed through his own weakness.
So maybe we should shift gears slightly now. Look at how these three characters aren't just people in a romance. They really work as powerful archetypes. And that gives the novel the psychological depth that makes it resonate so much, even today.
Okay, yeah. Let's break that down. Devdas Mukherjee. He's the absolute definition of an anti-hero. He feels love intensely, sure, but he's ultimately defined by his weakness, his self-pity. His downfall is definitely self-inflicted. I mean, he chooses to drink himself to death.
Yeah.
But that choice is so heavily pushed, catalyzed by this rigid society that basically gave him no route to happiness with Parvati. He's the weak man who lets the strong system just roll over him.
Then you look at Parvati. She's passionate, yes, and has this strong sense of self-respect. She represents that pure, unwavering love. But she is completely hemmed in by the expectations of her time. Her decision to marry the older man isn't just passive acceptance. It's framed as a calculated choice for stability, for social survival. It's her way of having some agency in a world that gave women basically zero say in who they loved or married.
And Chandramukhi, she's the outsider, the marginalized one, but she ends up being the story's true moral center, doesn't she? She's shown as dignified, fiercely devoted. Her love is presented as stronger, more selfless. It exists completely outside society's judgments. She gives up everything for Devdas, embodying this kind of ethical purity that really highlights the hypocrisy of the elite society.
Right.
Devdas couldn't escape.
And if we think about how the story is told, the author's style, Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay's style, is crucial. It's written in this very simple, almost plain prose, but it's incredibly lyrical and emotional. He seems to deliberately avoid fancy literary tricks. Instead, he just drills down deep into the emotional and psychological lives of the characters.
Yeah, that focus on their internal pain is what makes it such a powerful social document, I think. You really feel Devdas's tumultuous inner world, as the source puts it, and you feel the quiet suffering of both Parvati and Chandramukhi. It's not just told to you, you experience it through them.
And that's why critics consistently praise it. It's not just a love story. It's seen as this really unflinching look at the hypocrisy and cruelty of the caste system and patriarchal families. By tying Devdas's personal agony so tightly to that institutional cruelty, the novel really earns its place as important social realism.
And this whole tragic journey just builds and builds towards that absolutely heartbreaking ending, which is pure symbolism. Devdas knows he's dying from the years of drinking. And driven by this last desperate promise he made, he travels all the way to Parvati's village just to see her one more time before he
He
collapses.
just gets there, somehow drags himself to her house, and dies. Right there on her doorstep.
Right.
Alone, an unknown figure. He doesn't even fulfill that final promise. But the final twist, the really cruel part, is Parvati's reaction. It's legendary in Indian literature.
Right. She hears the news, she's overcome with grief, and she rushes to the door. She wants to cross the threshold to reach him one last time.
But her husband's family stops her, physically holds her back. They confine her inside the house, reminding her of her duties as a wife, preventing her from breaking the rules of propriety, even for her dead lover. That specific, brutal detail, it symbolizes society's final, cruel victory. The rules of caste and duty literally block that final connection.
So, okay, bringing this back to you, the listener, today. What's the takeaway from this story from over a century ago? It seems like the novel's central tension, that awful, self-destructive cost of conforming versus the maybe impossible courage needed to follow your heart. It's just timeless, isn't it? These characters, they're more than just characters now. They're cultural archetypes. And the fact that it's constantly being remade into films decade after decade shows how relevant it still feels.
It's a really powerful reminder that personal tragedy is rarely just personal. It shows how those internal flaws, like Devdas's weakness, his indecisiveness, can line up so perfectly, so tragically, with external cruelty like the caste system, patriarchy. And together, they don't just create sadness, they create this inevitable path to self-destruction, ruin.
Okay, so let's leave you with a final thought to mull over, something building on the character analysis in the sources. If Devdas's downfall was, yes, self-inflicted, but also fundamentally enabled by society's rigid rules, then think about the two women in his life. Which one truly showed the greater courage in facing that impossible system?
Was it Parvati, who chose conformity, duty, stability, basically upholding the system's rules? Or was it Chandramukhi, who defied all the social judgments, risked her reputation, everything for selfless devotion? It brings up a really interesting question about what constitutes real rebellion versus acceptance, and maybe which path ultimately demands the stronger heart. Something for you to think about after this deep dive.